Let's talk about one of the most incredible and honestly forgotten chapters of the entire space race. We're going to Venus, a planet so unbelievably hostile that it literally destroys almost everything we send there. And we're going to focus on the last probe to ever actually touch its surface, the final incredible act in a relentless Soviet campaign to conquer an absolute hellscape.
Yep, you heard that right. For decades, no one, not a single country, has successfully landed a probe on our closest planetary neighbor. That final mission was the absolute peak of a massive Soviet program, a program obsessed with uncovering the secrets hidden beneath Venus's thick, permanent clouds.
So that's the big mystery here, isn't it? What on earth did those Soviet probes discover that was so important? And maybe even more important, why, after all that incredible effort, did we just stop going? Well, let's dig in.
Okay, to really get why they were so obsessed with Venus, you have to rewind to the early days of the space race. These days, Mars gets all the love, right? But back then, Venus was the real prize. It's so similar in size to Earth, our sister planet. But as we found out, it's a sister that went down a very, very dark path.
Back then, scientists were completely split. That thick, swirling cloud cover could be hiding one of two totally opposite things. On one hand, some people imagined a warm, steamy, tropical world, maybe even a jungle paradise teeming with life. But on the other hand, you had astronomers like the great Carl Sagan who theorized something way more sinister, that those clouds were actually trapping heat in a runaway greenhouse effect, creating an unimaginable planetary-scale oven. There was only one way to find out who was right.
And just like with pretty much every other big space first, the Soviet Union jumped in head first. They were absolutely dominating the early space race. First satellite, first person in orbit. Venus was the obvious next trophy for them to claim. So in 1961, they launched Venera 1. This thing was incredibly ambitious for the time. It was basically a probe strapped to a ballistic missile, aimed at another planet. It got close, but then a full systems failure. It went completely dark. No data ever came back.
So what did they do? They launched a backup, Venera 2. And this was totally normal back then because you pretty much expected things to fail. But unfortunately, it met the exact same fate. 2 attempts, 2 completely silent failures.
So while the Soviets were scratching their heads, NASA swooped in. In 1962, their Mariner 2 probe pulled off the first ever successful flyby of another planet. And the data it sent back from orbit, well, it was troubling. It measured surface temperatures over 230 degrees Celsius. That's more than twice the boiling point of water. It looked like Carl Sagan's hellscape theory was dead on. And with that discovery, NASA kind of lost interest, shifting its focus to the Moon and Mars. The Soviets, on the other hand? Oh, they were just getting started.
But the Soviets? They were not giving up. Their engineers just built bigger, tougher probes. They were absolutely determined to get a lander through those clouds and down to the surface. But in doing so, they stumbled upon this invisible force that was more destructive than anything they could have possibly imagined. Now here's where it gets really wild. We need to talk about atmospheric pressure. See, on Venus, the air isn't just air. It's thick. It's heavy. It's so incredibly dense that it actually behaves more like a fluid, like water. Think about diving deep into the ocean. The deeper you go, the more the weight of all that water above presses down on you, right? Well, on Venus, the air itself does the crushing. And that crushing force is exactly what happened to Venera 4 in 1967. For 90 agonizing minutes, this probe parachuted down, becoming the first craft ever to send back data from inside another planet's atmosphere. The readings just got crazier and crazier, the pressure and temperature climbing off the charts. And then, suddenly, nothing. Silence. The probe never even reached the ground.
The truth was just staggering. The probe hadn't malfunctioned. It had been annihilated. The immense, unimaginable atmospheric pressure had simply crushed it flat like a soda can. And believe it or not, the exact same thing happened to Venera 5 and Venera 6. The Soviets now knew their enemy wasn't just the incredible heat, it was the crushing weight of the sky itself.
So, what do you do when your probes keep getting crushed? Well, if you're a Soviet engineer in the 1960s, you build an even stronger probe. The next generation, starting with Venera 7, was basically a deep-sea submersible designed for space. We're talking a reinforced steel shell and an internal titanium sphere just to protect the instruments. In 1970, it was ready. Time to try for the first landing ever.
So after a really rough landing where its parachute probably just melted away,
Venera 7 miraculously survived long enough to transmit data from the surface, and the numbers it sent back were insane. The temperature, a staggering 475 degrees Celsius. That's almost 900 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead. It's literally the temperature inside a pizza oven. And the pressure? Oh, it confirmed their absolute worst fears. 92 times the pressure of Earth at sea level. To give you some perspective, standing on the surface of Venus would feel like being crushed under a full kilometer of ocean water. Just impossible!
And think about this. Despite all their incredible, brilliant engineering, no Soviet lander ever survived longer than about 2 hours in that environment. It was simply the most hostile place they had ever encountered. But, amazingly, they still weren't done.
Because their very next probe, Venera 8, discovered something that changed the game. It found that despite the crushing pressure, the searing heat, and clouds literally made it of sulfuric acid, a tiny little bit of sunlight actually made it to the surface. Just enough light to maybe take a photograph. And that became the new Holy Grail.
So, to get a camera to the surface as fast as humanly possible, they completely redesigned the lander. They got rid of the parachutes. Instead, they put this disc-shaped aero brake at the top to use the thick atmosphere itself to slow the descent, and then at the bottom, a circular, shock-absorbing impact ring to cushion the final, brutal landing. It wasn't elegant, but it was fast. And it worked. On October 22, 1975, Venera 9's camera lens cap popped off, and for the first time in all of human history, we saw the surface of another planet.
And the images were just so alien. Venera 9 showed this bizarre landscape of sharp, broken, jagged rocks. Venera 10 landed on a flat plain of cooled lava. But the peak, the absolute crowning achievement, was Venera 13 in 1981. It sent back the very first color photograph, revealing this yellowy-orange sandy rock. And get this, it carried a microphone, capturing the first sounds from another world, the faint howl of the wind and the clanking of the probe itself on the surface. After that, Venera 14 was the last one. It landed, it took its photos, and it died. And just like that, an entire era of exploration just came to an end. Which brings us all the way back to our original question. Why? Why, after all that blood, sweat, and treasure, did we just stop?
I mean, you just have to look at the legacy of the Venera program. It's staggering. The first atmospheric data, the first landing on another planet, the first pictures from the surface, the first sound from another world. They achieved a whole series of monumental firsts that cemented the Soviet Union's place as true pioneers of interplanetary exploration.
But the answer to why we stopped is, well, it's brutally practical. First, it is ridiculously expensive to build a machine that can survive for just an hour or two. Second, the scientific return you get for that investment is pretty low compared to, say, a Mars rover that can operate for years. And finally, the Soviet Union itself was nearing its end. Priorities shifted, funding dried up, and the political will to keep going to hell and back just vanished. And so, the surface of Venus remains largely unexplored. We have these brief, haunting glimpses from a bygone era, and that's it. It's our closest neighbor, a twisted sister to our own world, holding secrets we have only just begun to scratch the surface of. So you have to wonder, what else is waiting for us down there, beneath that permanent, mysterious veil of cloud?